As you play Magic, you may encounter quite a few types of people. Some casual, playing for fun, some playing for the win and the score. All of these types are valid, but there is another game within the game, which is deck building. Those playing for fun will generally brew their own decks and play to see how they perform. The hardcore version of these people, which you can see even on top tiers of the game, but not always, they use that skill for at least the first few tournaments when the new set is released and the meta is still up in the air. This is one skill I personally never got, but that has of course not stopped me from playing, and it should not stop you. But that's a big but. That does not mean if you lack this skill, you should only stick to net decks. Now, what is net decks? Net decks or net decking is a practice of looking at the recent tournament results and copying whatever top deck was, whatever deck that won or was in top 8. From what I have seen, most deck builders, especially the ones on the casual spectrum, abhor that practice and berate all those who do it. I find this to be completely against the spirit of the game, and you should never judge someone based on how they got their deck. If they're, however, playing a deck that is completely built on annoying the other person, feel free to judge them to hell. Because it is rare for such decks to make it top ranks, but it happens, of course, like the infamous Nexus of Fate decks. Now, the net decking itself I do not think is a bad thing. I will say, however, just copying someone's deck without tuning it is what will make you a second-rate player. So, net decking can have a bit of a spectrum, so to speak. A person who copies a deck is just straight up net decker, there's nothing there. But a person can use a net deck as a basis and then build their own. Now, what I mean by that is this. When someone is preparing for a tournament, they tune their deck against the type of decks they expect to see in the tournament. This means if you copy their deck and used it in the wild, even if you play it perfectly, it will fall short, because it's not built to fight some of the newer or different decks than there actually are. Which brings us to the type of deck builder that me and a lot of my personal favorite Magic players fall into, the tuner. This type of person may not play in the first few tournaments, and even if they do, usually not with a deck that they themselves have built, but another deck brewer that they know, and then they test and fine-tune it together to make it tournament ready. Speaking for myself, when I build something, I like to have a frame of reference and a concrete foundation when I build it. So the way a tuner likes to make a deck is to get a nice type of deck they want to play that they think will win or just suits their playstyle, depending on their purpose, of course. And then they switch up a few cards. Some change versatile cards to make bad matchups a bit better, and some add more versatile cards which will make good matchup worse, but will make bad matchups better. Change out a few sideboard cards for specific purposes, or they could even say change up some of the cards in case that they were initially planning as a counter to a matchup that just doesn't happen. And so as an example, when I played Esper midrange, I would have 2 Lyras and 1 Enter the God Eternals, mainly to improve against my Gruul matchup, which has helped me on quite a few occasions. The takeaway here is that there are many ways to play the game, and someone is not strictly better or worse based on how they build their deck or what type of deck building that they're using. They're all good at one thing or another, they have pros and cons. There's no point in judging a player based on how they got their deck. By knowing what types of general groups you fall into, you can improve the way you build your decks or the way that you can tune your decks. Now, of course, there's always the controversy whether, copying a deck is just straight up copying the deck is good or bad. And I say it doesn't matter. I never done it myself. I've seen a few people do it in my local LGS, but It just makes them very versatile and predictable. Like, I know exactly what cards they're gonna play in that given situation, which allows me to easily counterplay them without adding much. But adding a few surprise cards is oftentimes the thing that is enough to surprise even the most advanced players. Now, those cards do not necessarily have to be bad, but they can be something that they just simply did not expect to begin with. Well, thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time.